Once again, Ambassador, accept, on behalf of entire Commonwealth, my deepest thanks, and I hope you will pass on our gratitude to your king. In a time like this, his decision to stand side by side with us is deeply appreciated. I will patch you through to our high command now, so you can iron out the details. Once again, thank you. Good day, Prime Minister. For the first time in years, I actually have some good news.
I can see that. You are aware, though, that their help is only a small drop in the sea of our needs.
But it is a start, and if they send even a single rusted tub of a warship, it will still be more than any one of us anticipated. It feels good to have allies once again, even though they're not the ones we expected.
Then it is good news indeed. Though it still feels odd. Remember, my generation grew up in a time where we always stood alone against all dangers out there.
Considering just how many races live within our borders, I'd say we never were truly alone. Still, I understand your point. But there's more to that promise of help than meets the eye, because if even Mirovandians, who never really considered us friends and are far away from the Unbidden, can see just how dangerous the situation is, then it bodes well for our future diplomatic endeavors.
A few days ago I would have agreed, but today, after that message that came from Eternal Empire, I'd say we're going to have even fewer friends than before.
Understandable. The Empire is a powerful enemy, and allying with us is sure to bring their wrath.
That's not what I mean, and you know it, Chancellor. It may not be obvious to you, but to our neighbors, hell, to some of our own citizens, this revelation is a bit more than they can process. They look at the Empire, the most bloodthirsty, insanely genocidal nation in the galaxy, and see, well, they see you, humans. Now, of course, you, me, and every other reasonable person know that at this point, after 3 centuries of separate existence, you are practically 2 different races. But there will be plenty of those who will not see it that way. Already the extranet is flooding with conspiracy theories claiming that Commonwealth is just an imperial front, a decoy used to lure unsuspecting aliens and prepare them for extermination. No, do not tell me that these are lies. Of course they are. My very life is a proof of that you are not Imperials, that you can save and help others and live together with them. But facts rarely survive confrontation with conspiracy theories, especially in times like these. Which brings me to my original point. I wanted to ask you, why aren't you treating this new threat more seriously?
Because we still have invasion of the Unbidden on our hands. They are a deadly threat to all of us, including the Empire, so I'm not going to concern myself with a bunch of insane maniacs who live on the other side of the galaxy. And in all honesty, I'm almost sure that this declaration of war was nothing more but a publicity stunt they did for their own internal benefit, because I honestly cannot believe that anyone could hold such a grudge for almost 300 years. No one sane, that is. And besides, there is no way for them to reach us, and even if they somehow manage to send forces into our territory, there is no way they could maintain them, which I think is a decent enough reason to not worry about them too much. There will be plenty of time to deal with them once we deal with the Unbidden, if we deal with them.
We can. Who but the Commonwealth, especially now with childhood hero of several generations acting as a chancellor, which is another thing I wanted to discuss. I have with me reports from our industrial facilities, research labs, and, most importantly, from our civilian observers. If you have a moment, we should review them, especially these last ones. If morale of our people falls, then no amount of wisdom and resources will save us.
True, but from what I heard, those databanks left by the curators can help with that. I don't really have time to work too much with the Science Council anymore, but from what I was able to see, the data within them is extraordinary. Granted, we barely scratched the surface at this point, but at the very least we managed to uncover several logs describing the Unbidden in great detail. It's not at all optimistic lecture, of course, and it looks like the arrival of that second group threw the curators into a blind panic, because such a thing never happened before, but at the very least we are not fighting completely blind. If we can understand this enemy, we can figure out how to fight back.
Then let us hope we will have enough time to decipher all this information. And speaking of, I just returned from Engineering Division. Mr. Pilal and his team took a long look at that blueprint the caretakers left us, and they seem almost sure it might be the key to winning this war.
Almost?
Well, there is also a small chance that it will destroy the entire reality, but since that option is on the table anyway, I'd say we should try it regardless of repercussions. At the very least, we'll go out on our own terms and take the Unbidden down with us.
Greetings everyone and welcome back to Second Chance. And we return with a bang since, just recently, we have learned from the curators that our situation is even worse than we expected and we are basically a living bait in a galactic-sized trap for invaders from another dimension. But that is, unfortunately, not all, because if you look at the top left corner of the screen, you will also notice that we are once again at war, except that said war was not declared by one of our usual rivals, but by the nation located at the exact opposite side of the galaxy, the dreaded Eternal Empire. But, as it turned out, the Empire, aside from the obvious military power and apparent hatred for all galactic nations, was hiding yet another secret, namely, they are us, which is to say, descendants of humans from good old Earth. It's difficult to tell how exactly they have arrived here and what prompted them to become a nation bent on exterminating all other life forms, but we cannot deny that they are, more or less, our people. Except they clearly do not think that way about us, and it looks like their leader, who called himself the Voice of the Empress, called for a mass mobilization against Commonwealth in order to exterminate us. They haven't contacted us directly though. We managed to intercept one of their nationwide messages, and because of that we know that their leader issued a mass conscription in order to, as he said, bring us to justice for the sins committed on old Earth. We assume that he speaks about the fact that our ancestors abandoned his people to certain death, except quite clearly Imperials managed to find another way out, and ended up in the very same galaxy as we did, only on the other side of it. But here's the thing. A few years ago, a revelation like that would have turned Commonwealth completely on its head, with our population demanding to know how such a thing was even possible. But today, with everything we have learned from the curators and with Unbidden invasion in full swing, it's not even close to the top of our priority list. In a way, it is good to know that more humans manage to get out of Earth, but on the other hand, these humans are clearly not open to any form of diplomacy, and all they want is to exterminate us, which makes them pretty much identical to the visitors, except they look almost exactly like us. But aside from that, once it became clear that there is no way to make them listen to reason, the Empire was quickly considered a secondary issue. Yes, they may be powerful, yes, they may be determined and eager to exact their revenge on us, but then again, they are, as was said, on the very opposite side of the galaxy, so if they wanted to reach us, they would either have to go through territory of Celestial Alliance, or directly through chaotic mess that is this territory now, and both options seem rather unlikely. What is interesting, however, is the fact that now that we know they are humans, we are able to fine-tune our sensors in order to pick up some of their signals, since basically we're just looking for ourselves. And while we may not have that much data yet, one thing we can tell for sure: citizens of Eternal Empire are, without a doubt, the most numerous group in the entire galaxy, and our initial scans indicate that there may be around 500 billion of them within their borders. To put it in perspective, Commonwealth has only around 300 billion citizens in total, with less than 200 billion of them being humans. So, in a way, humanity became the dominant species in the galaxy. Problem is, we're now trying to eradicate ourselves, so if that war actually happens, we should probably expect our numbers to drop drastically. Because in a conflict on such a scale, civilian casualties will be unavoidable, just like there were when Imperials and Dis fought each other. Still, there probably is no reason for us to worry too much. The Empire is far away, and even if they somehow manage to get into our territory, sustaining the entire fleet that far away from home would probably be impossible for them. We'll still keep an eye on their movements, of course, but other than that, we have far more important things to worry about. And that, of course, means the Unbidden, who are still, as you can see, far more eager to attack themselves than us. Although, unfortunately, that is slowly starting to change. When the second orange group of these creatures entered our galaxy, both them and their blue counterparts immediately charged almost all their forces at each other, clashing in massive battles that, in some cases, lasted for entire months. This bought us some time to prepare, not to mention that once these battles were over, their visitors were greatly weakened, but unfortunately, even though they slaughtered each other on a massive scale, those fleets that remain are still far more powerful than anything we could muster, especially those groups who protect their portals. Even their raiding fleets are still more powerful than our forces, and it seems that after they dealt with initial aggression towards each other, both invader factions decided to fall back and finally focus on us. And as you can see, one of their goals is Sisk Inatab, a planet inhabited by the Buvondon, a race of sentient fungoids we uplifted from the Age of Steam. They are, technically, our protectorate, but the truth is simple and unforgiving. There is nothing we can do to help them. Even if we send all our forces to Galpan's system, the chances of actually stopping the visitors would still be close to zero. All we can do now is send a ton of civilian ships there and try to evacuate as many of these fungoids as we can. But other than that, unless we find a solution to actually fight on even grounds with the invaders, the only thing we can do is keep our distance. But fortunately not all is bleak. For one, you might have noticed before that our southern neighbors, the Mirovandians, have decided to commit their forces to our cause, and right now their fleet is on its way to link up with Manticore. But more than that, after we attacked Caretaker Station, we have gained access to some of their databanks. Well, technically it looks like they left them to us as a parting gift, but let's not dwell on that. And the data we found there is, to put it bluntly, amazing, and advanced way beyond anything we could even dream of. For one, there is a ton of info on the Unbidden there, info that we can use to better understand them and, by extension, improve our tactics in order to counter their attacks. But aside from that, other databanks are filled to the brim with informations about, well, everything from military matters through politics to chemistry or astrophysics, and, if Science Council is to be believed, the data could be used to advance our nation by decades, if not centuries. Only problem is, all this data is not only extremely complicated, so it takes time to actually make sense of it, but also very well encrypted, so before we can even start understanding all that knowledge the caretakers left us, we first must learn how to even read it. And despite all our efforts, it's going to take us years to fully decipher. But at the very least, now we have a goal to work towards. Maybe, somewhere deep within these encrypted files, we will find a way to solve our problems. We just have to survive until then. That, however, means that we will have to defend ourselves in order to buy our researchers as much time as possible, but fortunately there are some good news on that front. Namely, in recent years Science Council has finished several military-focused projects, which we can now use to greatly improve overall efficiency of our ships. We won't just be installing regular upgrades though. Right now we have enough data on the Unbidden that we know that some of our weapons and tactics simply won't work against them, and so, despite potential threat of Imperial invasion and extremely high cost of this project, we will have to retrofit our ships with different weapons, designed specifically to inflict as much damage as possible against the visitors. So, here's what we know. First and foremost, invader ships aren't exactly material in any way we understand it, and as such, they do not have armor. In fact, it's debatable if they can even comprehend the idea of it. That means that our anti-armor weapons, like plasma throwers and laser cannons, are not going to be as useful against them. More than that, visitor ships are very well shielded, and our anti-armor guns are far less effective against shields than any other weapons. So, we're going to have to replace them, and for the first time we're actually going to heavily invest in a weapon type we never really paid too much attention to: disruptors, which can be used to overload shields far faster than any other kind of weapon. Of course, we can't use just the disruptors. Once enemy shields are down, we still have to actually destroy their ships, and that's where our railguns and missiles are coming in. Missiles are especially useful because, from what we've seen so far, the Unbidden don't really use any kind of pointed defense weapons, which is understandable since they don't use missiles or strikecraft as well, so maybe the very idea of such weapons is alien to them. But that also means that our torpedoes and strikecraft should have a field day with them. Both these weapons can bypass shields completely, and they won't have to worry about return fire. Though, of course, their visitors can still just destroy our ships, which will stop us from firing any more torpedoes and will, eventually, render strikecraft useless, since they won't have any place to rearm after attack runs. Still, at least we know how to prepare ourselves, so we can begin a slow process of upgrading our fleet, made more dangerous by the fact that our uninvited guests can show up on our doorstep at any moment. We will also be retrofitting our merit citadels. We are at the point where we can build them practically everywhere and in decent numbers, but at least until now, there was really no reason for us to make them any more powerful than they were. But, of course, that is no longer a valid option, so it's time to make our strongholds even more powerful. Aside from upgrading their weapons, however, we will be doing one more thing. As you may remember, merit citadels are equipped with powerful FTL snares, which we can use to redirect incoming enemy forces directly into our kill zones. Except, well, with the Unbidden we don't really want to bring them close to us, so instead we're going to replace these inhibitors with equally powerful shield disruptors, which should greatly reduce defensive capabilities of enemy fleets. Although, as our military minds admit behind the scenes, even that may not be enough. Merits may be powerful and resilient, sure, but on their own they will stand just as little chance as our other forces. We also have two more new ship designs to add to our fleet. First one is 800-meter Hussar-class strike cruiser, a slightly more powerful version of regular cruisers, crewed by 700 people and equipped with a gravitic field generator, which means that we can use it to greatly slow down enemy ships and make them easier to target. We won't be building too many of them, however. Their power is comparable to regular cruisers, but they are more expensive, so having 5 or 10 of them should be enough. And finally, we have Nidira-class carrier, named after Shalani planet lost to the light. It is almost a battleship-sized vessel, 2.7 kilometers with almost 2,000 people on board, designed specifically for bringing tons of strike craft into the fight. More than that, it is also covered in missile launchers, which can be used to fire devastating, withering swarms of antimatter nukes at anyone in range. Unfortunately, it doesn't really have means of protecting itself from missiles, but our light carriers have that covered, not to mention the Unbidden don't use weapons like that. So now, our fleets have been redesigned, with the sole purpose of surviving Unbidden invasion. But now, we come to the most difficult part. Drafting a new design for a ship is easy. Actually retrofitting it is far more complicated and time-consuming process, so Curaçao shipyards now have even more work ahead of them. And it looks like overtime is going to be their constant companion for now, because, as you can see, the Orange Unbidden have once more begun moving against us. This time, they sent a raiding fleet to our Kodria system, where one of our Paradise worlds is, and as you can see, they engaged Merit's citadel that protects it. And although the sheer resilience of our fortress enabled it to withstand devastating firepower of the invaders for a while, the sad truth is that our defenses can't even hope to stand against these raiders. They can buy us some time and disrupt enemy movement, but that's it. If we actually want to make use of them, we'll have to group all our forces together, and only then we may have a chance of winning. Because on their own, these stations, powerful as they are, can't even make a dent in hostile formations. And yet, we will have to build more and more of them, if only to gain as much time as possible. Fortunately, by now these stations can be mostly automated, so we won't be losing that many men every time one of them is destroyed, but I think it's safe to say that, at this point, we must accept the fact that, in this war, casualties are unavoidable, and on a scale that we have never even considered before. Fortunately, there is a bit of a silver lining there. It appears that fighting against our defenses caused the Unbidden to alter their course, so, for now at least, they should leave Kodria alone. We can't count on that to save us forever though. One day we will have to attack and destroy them, or they will come into our territory and do the same to us. Still, time for some good news for a change. As you can see, our Mirovandian allies have just arrived in Skorom system to link up with Manticore and provide support, although at this moment Manticore is undergoing retrofits and it will be months until it can actually move out. Still, Mirovandian presence is very much welcome, although, as you can clearly see, their vessels are far less advanced than ours. But there is an absolute ton of them, and that's a good thing in itself. Sure, individually they may be weak, but they can still fire at the enemy, and perhaps more importantly, draw fire away from our more powerful vessels, although, as you may expect, we won't actually say that out loud to them. Now, we have opened our databanks to Mirovandians as soon as they promised their support, so there is a chance that they will send a bit more advanced reinforcements further down the line. But even if they won't, the very presence of their fleet is a great morale booster in itself. We are no longer fighting alone, and to make it even better, the support came from a nation that never really liked us that much in the first place. If they can understand the threat, then it bodes well for our future diplomatic missions. And with a bit of luck, we will be able to end the idiots' war to our west and get them to do something actually productive. But as the invasion from another reality goes on, so do our lives, and once again we have wartime elections on our hands, though it's pretty much overshadowed by the fact that the visitors are approaching Kodria and Mazaka system as we speak. As such, the campaigns are mostly tame and focused on unity instead of differences between various political parties. But there is a surprise. After losing to Shen Kuo in last elections, Admiral Shu Lin is once again at the very top of all pre-election polls. And no wonder. After all, Commonwealth citizens associate her with times of greatest prosperity and expanse of our nation. Kuo, on the other hand, took power in a dark time that only got darker as his term progressed, so no wonder our people are not that eager to elect him once again. But, as was said, it's all secondary right now. As you can see, in first days of December 2315, one of Unbidden fleets took positions orbiting Kodria and began bombarding our planetary defenses. Beams of energy cut through the atmosphere and would have inflicted devastating losses to our cities and infrastructure, but thankfully our planetary shields were able to deflect and dissipate most of the damage. And then, to our complete and utter surprise, the Unbidden fleet stopped its attack and left. More than that, our readings indicate that they intend to move far north, into territory now controlled by the Blue Unbidden. Maybe, our militarists theorize, they want to launch an offensive on their own. Maybe it's something else, but whatever the reason, Kodria earns some respite, at least for a while. Still, we have learned of the sheer power of Unbidden bombardments. Even though we were attacked only for a few days and we had our planetary defenses, tens of millions of people on the surface of Kodria still lost their lives. Those upgrades we ordered for Mantico would really be useful right now. And now, it's time for a little surprise. The elections came and went, and as the votes were counted, it turned out that previous polls have been completely wrong. Because in the end, it was not Admiral Shu Lin, but commander of our Grand Forces, General Lop Aspinaka, who has been elected as a new chancellor, despite the fact that he was not really that present in mass media. But there is a reason for this. After Professor Tanwa's death, Aspinaka took her position as the figurehead of Technocratic Committee, our second most numerous political party. And as Unbidden invasion progressed, people slowly started to lose hope that Lin's Xenoists would actually manage to organize a galaxy-wide coalition with other nations, and instead turned to our brightest minds to find a solution. And the result of that change of loyalties is Aspinaka's victory. Which also means that two of Commonwealth's highest offices are no longer held by humans, despite us still being the most numerous race in the country. However, all of this is very much overshadowed by news from the front. Siskin Atab, Buvondon home planet, has been completely overrun by the Unbidden, and almost every single one of their species is now dead, which means that we failed as their supposed protectors. And closer to home, the Unbidden are in Yadran home system of Mazaka once again, and this time it looks like they're here to stay. But there is one upside. While Aspinaka might have been important as an army commander during our previous wars, this time his abilities wouldn't really be that useful, since the visitors are not really invading planets, they just destroy them from orbit and absorb all energy they can. So, Aspinaka can do more good as a chancellor than a general now. But it also means that our best and most renowned explorer, Commander Shen Kuo, can get back to work for the Science Council, which is a job he is far more suited for. Granted, he will have to remain in the government for a few weeks to help Aspinaka with his new duties, but once that is done, Commander Kuo is going to take to the stars once again, and hopefully use his century-long experience to help us resolve this crisis. And the chance to prove himself once more came surprisingly soon. As was said, one of the Unbidden fleets invaded our Mazaka system and destroyed our defenses there almost effortlessly. Almost, because for the very first time since this dimensional invasion started, we managed to bite the Unbidden back, except it's far less grandiose than it sounds. All we managed to do was destroy a single one of their smallest ships, and we had to lose 2 of our merit citadels in order to do it, which is certainly not a good exchange. But although this one vessel has been taken out, it was not, surprisingly, destroyed. Instead, it just stopped glowing and moving and just stayed where it fell. The rest of Unbidden fleet ignored it and moved on, clearly uninterested in this empty husk, but to us it presents an unprecedented opportunity. If we could approach this ship, we could perhaps better understand how it works, and use that knowledge to form some new tactics and strategies. And that is where Commander Kuo comes in. He's going to take command of one of our science ships that arrived from the Tejnit Kingdom and move to Mazaka to try and salvage whatever information he and his crew can find on this disabled vessel. But there is one issue. The Unbidden fleet has begun bombarding Natigir, which means that they're very much able to intercept our science vessel if it tries to move too close. Sending Kuo now would be nothing but suicide, but fortunately, it turned out that some of our citizens managed to, unwittingly, alter the situation in our favor. Hello people of the Commonwealth. Are you ready for some entertainment? Are you ready for some fun? Are you ready to show these fucking glowing shitheads what you think of their uninvited appearance? Because we in the Void Vipers certainly are, and we are in Mazaka right now to do something about it. As you know, the glowy fuckers are currently breaking their teeth on Natigir's planetary shields. So far they haven't seen us, or if they have, they're too bloody moronic to do anything about it. Which works for us, because we're here to show them that we do not care for any of their bullshit. Take a look now. See that fleet? Me and my mates decided to go straight through it. The first person to get to the other side gets to be the next Viper boss. Oh, and by the way, at the bottom of this live feed there is a little link where you can donate a handful of credits to an organization that helps refugees, so go ahead and do some good while watching the show. Now, some of you might ask, why the hell are you doing this? And the answer is, because we fucking can! Because someone has to show these oversized light bulbs that we're not afraid of them, and we're up to flip them off even if it gets us killed. And hey, if it gets us killed, our dear friends in Sign-On Cybernetics will get us back in shape in no time, so let's live a little. Oh, it looks like our guests finally noticed us. Vipers, start your engines and I'll see you on the other side. Now get ready and go! Oh, and Fyodor is already down. Such a bad start for a veteran of so many space races. Lesson number 1, kids, you hesitate, you eat an energy beam. But look at that display there in the front. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Viper's own Katria Gerel, and let me tell you, she is just as agile in the sheets as she is in her spaceships. What? Come on, Kat, I can't allow that kind of language on live feed. Man. What a woman. And there goes Igor, straight as an arrow, and yet not one of the Unbidden is firing at him. Lesson number 2, if your head is completely empty, you're practically Oh, no you're not, it seems. See you back home, Igor. Now, oh bugger, where did you come from? Whoa, I sucked back there. Shit performance, I get it, but you didn't have to show me this instantly after bringing me back, man. On behalf of Sign-On Cybernetic Solutions, I would like to ask you to start taking this a bit more seriously, Mr. Semashko. You saw the video. Do you understand now why we're not willing to prolong your restoration contract? Because you're a boring bunch of emotionless pricks in expensive suits? Come on, man, you saw the numbers yourself. 7 billion views in less than 24 hours, and the ratings are through the roof. Not to mention that this charity foundation could build a new planet with all the cash people donated. Indeed they could, but that is beside the point. Our contract strictly states that restoration package is supposed to be used in emergencies and accidents. What you're doing is no less than committing suicide, and worse than that, you also decided to broadcast it to the entire nation. SCS wants nothing to do with such reckless behavior and bad publicity, so we can consider our contract null and void. Bad publicity? Are you kidding me, you miserable man? What we're doing here is raising spirits, showing people that the Unbidden are not to be afraid by getting right in their faces and flipping them the bird. Times like these, people need some levity. They need someone to tell them that this is all just a bad joke. Otherwise, they will piss themselves to death with fear. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you recklessly violated the contract between our company and yourself by needlessly wasting valuable resources, which could be used against the invaders, mind you, since our company is working very closely with the government. So now... Hold on a sec. Yes, that's me. Oh, alright, I'll be right there. There is no need for that, sir. I merely called you as a courtesy, but right now I really need to talk with Citizen Semashko over there, so if you'd kindly leave us. But... I mean, yes, I have important business to attend to. Good, then see to it. Now, Mr. Semashko, I represent Commonwealth's Naval High Command, and we need to have a serious talk about your little stunt. So wait, let me get this absolutely clear. You're saying that after our rush through their fleet, the Unbidden stopped bombarding Natigir? That is what I said, Mr. Semashko. But why? We do not know. Now, whether your actions are insane or not, it's clear that they threw the visitors completely off guard. Maybe they got so confused by your recklessness that they changed course. Granted, they are still moving to Yadrani, which means that problem was not resolved, but only delayed, but every day we can gain is valuable. Which brings me to my final point. We want you and the rest of the Vipers to do it again. Okay, 1, that was not expected, and 2, you might not be aware, but Simon's lawyer decided to cut my contract. I get out there, I die, so I'll pass. Worry not, the government has already bought your contract, so you can throw yourself into insane danger anytime you want. In fact, we're going to pay you for it, and very well at that. Hell, should have led with that, my man, but I'll have to ask the rest of the Vipers first. Technically, there is no need for that. Your friend, Ms. Garel, actually managed to get across Unbidden fleet unscathed, so she is de facto a new leader of your band. And she wanted me to, quote, get that sleazy fuck to work. Well, at least that was the part I managed to understand among the sea of insults. Yep, that's catchy for you. Okay, G-Man, you made your point. Where do I sign? So then, it appears that despite the power our visitors wield, they can be, to our surprise, extremely easily forced to change the focus of their attention. As you can see, a handful of civilian vessels entered Mazaka's system. The Unbidden destroyed them, because if they can wipe out our fortress, then a handful of civilian spaceship is practically no issue for them. But after they did that, they seemed to completely forget about Natigir, and instead set course for Yadrani. It's not perfect news, after all the system is still in danger and one of the planets is still going to be besieged, but at the very least, we managed to stop the bombardment of Natigir before our planetary defenses broke. More than that though, we can use Unbidden lack of focus in the future. At this point, our constructor ships are completely automated and we can produce them in a matter of days for very little cost, and then we can use said ships to just charge straight into Unbidden formation and completely mess up their decision-making processes. Assuming, of course, that this whole situation wasn't just a singular event. And regardless, we're not going to send those constructor ships immediately, because we actually want the Unbidden to focus on Yadrani for a while, as that will give Commander Ku an opportunity to lead an expedition to that disabled visitor ship. The Yadrans, it seems, are once again the ones who pulled the short straw, and will have to endure yet another siege of their home planet. But if they can hold, then perhaps we could finally learn something solid about our uninvited guests. So let us hope that our reptilian, dragon-like citizens will be as strong as heroes from their ancient legends. And, despite overwhelming odds, it looks like Carthemas will be able to buy us enough time. As you can see, Commander Ko and his new ship, CSV Paskenen, are already in Mazaka, and as soon as that disabled Unbidden ship was in range, the crew instantly focused every single research instrument on it, in preparations for the boarding operation. And it was then when people of the Commonwealth, for the very first time, had a chance to take a look at Visitor's ship up close, and the info uncovered there turned out to be extremely useful. For one, as you may remember, the Unbidden ships, when they are glowing and operational, aren't exactly in our reality, at least not fully. Instead, they constantly shift between their own dimension and ours, which makes tracking them an absolute nightmare. But there is actually more to it. For one, It appears that some parts of these vessels are always located in our reality and serve as a sort of anchor that keeps the ship in one piece as it jumps between different planes of existence. These parts are very small, 3 by 3 meters at best, at least in case of the smallest vessels, but there are several of them, and once they are destroyed, the ship loses all connection to Unbidden home territory, and when that happens, its form is confined to this reality, except it is now clear that they cannot survive here without those dimensional links. Which ultimately means that once these anchor points are destroyed, the ship becomes fully material in our world, but it cannot hold itself together given our laws of physics, and immediately, well, dies in a way, leaving behind an empty husk like the one we're just researching. And that, of course, is exciting news, because we now know Unbidden's major weakness, so we can start designing plans to exploit it. Granted, taking down these anchors is not an easy task, not with defensive energy fields their vessels project, but at the very least we know what to target. But aside from that, we were also able to take a look at Unbidden technology, and that in itself would be enough to keep the Science Council busy for decades. For one, the jump engines operate on a completely different set of rules than the ones we possess. Instead of using warp, wormholes or hyperlanes, the visitors can move across extreme distances by breaking the very laws of our universe. Basically, every time they use their drives, our researchers call them simply jump drives, they sort of rewrite entire reality, so that their fleet is not at point A but in point B in an instant. This sounds like black magic, and the very implications of these ideas are enough to throw our researchers into a mindless panic, but then there is another thing. It looks like with proper preparations, we should be able to replicate the process. Whether this is a good idea or not is a completely different matter, but there is no denying that having access to such jump drives would be extremely useful. Additionally, we had a chance to take a look at visitors' weapons, and that is yet another scary but ultimately extremely useful knowledge. Until now, we suspected that these matter disintegrators, as we call them, simply remove matter from existence by destroying it. The truth, however, is slightly different. Everything the Unbidden fire at is not destroyed, but instead transported back into their dimension, which makes sense. After all, it looks like their world is composed almost entirely out of energy, with matter being either completely or almost non-existent. And since the Unbidden feed on matter, it makes sense that they would send some of it home, either to use it to build those dimensional anchors or to, perhaps, feed their own kin who are on the other side. Regardless of the reason, however, these weapons are extremely effective and downright terrifying, especially now that we have an idea how they work. But just like with their jump drives, it looks like we should be able to replicate them given enough time. And finally, we also managed to figure out how the Unbidden can manipulate antimatter in order to create these protective field around their vessels, though, as with other discoveries, it will probably be years before we're able to replicate the technology for ourselves. Still, there is no denying that this single disabled ship turned out to be a goldmine of new knowledge. Now we just have to, somehow, buy ourselves enough time to find some practical applications for it. Fortunately, with Commander Kuo now back in the Science Council, that time should come sooner rather than later, and the sooner the better, because with every passing day, Unbidden attacks become more fierce, and we slowly start to run out of ideas on how to delay them. Not to mention that every day we wait, another one of their fleets may suddenly arrive through the portal. No rest for the Commonwealth then, it seems. If we want to stay alive, then it looks like we'll have to work 24/7 until this invasion is dealt with. And the time to take action is almost upon us. With Kodria and Masaka under siege, it was decided that our forces should move out and engage Unbidden fleet as soon as all retrofits Manticore ordered are in place. Except, as you can see, our fleets have seen a bit of reorganization. For one, CSV Archon was sent back to Ortus to serve as a symbolic bastion there. It may seem weird to remove our most powerful ship from the main combat formation, but the truth is that Archon is simply too unsustainable during any offensive campaigns. It slows our forces down to a crawl, and should it ever be destroyed, the morale of our people would suffer immensely, since this is technically our flagship. So instead, it's going to protect our capital, and in its place, Manticore is going to receive some more reinforcements in form of 2 strike cruisers and a freshly constructed carrier, CSV Nidira, 3 ships that, when their firepower is combined, are not only more powerful than our dreadnought, but also more flexible. Also, we are not going to use Task Force Eagle as a separate formation anymore. When the decision to create this second fleet was made, everyone expected that we would only fight conventional enemies. The Unbidden put a stop to that. Spreading our forces between different formations is simply not viable anymore, and so we will disband Task Force Eagle and put its ships back into Manticore under command of Admiral Ibrahim. But Admiral Lin is not going to be left without a job. As you might have noticed before, the visitors have these constructor ships that they send on their own into various systems to construct the, for the lack of better words, starbases. We do not want that, of course, so in order to prevent them from spreading into our territory, we're going to create small but highly mobile fleet of several corvettes, destroyers, and put them under Shulin's command. It may not be as prestigious as a previous assignment, there's no denying that, but it is necessary. The Unbidden are powerful enough. Any losses we can inflict on them will make our job easier further down the line. It is time then. Our fleets have been retrofitted with newest weapons and defensive systems, so now it is time to finally take the fight to the enemy. And just in time, because, as you can see, sieges of Kodria and Mazaka are not going well in our favor. The initial idea was to fight the visitors under cover of one of our Merit citadels, but since they are all destroyed in these systems, or they very soon will be, we'll just have to rely on the power of our ships, and fortunately our electronic warfare cruisers can disrupt hostile shields as well, although not as efficiently as Merit's. Still, despite that, the morale is actually rather high amongst our forces. Our upgrades significantly improved overall power of our fleet, and they were designed specifically in order to make as much damage to the Unbidden as possible. And the projections, for the very first time since these invaders appeared in our world, look favorable. So, without any long and flowery speeches, Admiral Ibrahim took Manticore to Mazaka system, ready to kick the Unbidden out of our territory. This battle is going to be the most important one we ever fought, because for the first time we do not fight for ourselves, or even for our allies, but for the fate of this entire galaxy. We are going to fight to stop the genocide that began when life on Earth was still just a bunch of microbes living in primordial oceans. We do not know if we can stop it, we do not know if anyone can, but we're damned well going to try our best. Damn it! No, turn it off right now! Good. Alright, looks like we're going to be fighting without external display or we'll go completely blind. Now, back to it. Number 1, report. Good initial strike, ma'am. Missiles away, squadrons away, good hits on enemy targets. Looks like we outranged them by good 11,000 kilometers. No direct hits to enemy hulls, but we overloaded a lot of their shields. Next volley should see more damage. Good. Can we keep our distance from them and attack from afar? Only for a while. They may be outranged, but they are faster, so they are going to gain on us. In fact, we are within their range now. Got it. All ships, prepare for evasive maneuvers. What the hell happened? Number 1, report. On it. No, this cannot be right. Computer, recalculate. Answer me, number 1. We lost our corvettes, ma'am. How many? All. We lost all of them. It looks like they focused fire on our smaller vessels first. I can see that. All ships, abort evasive maneuvers. There is almost no delay between their guns firing and those energy beams striking their targets. Burn away from the enemy instead and put as much power as possible to deflector shields. And keep firing. We're target locked. All stations, brace for impact! Bloody hell, is everyone alright? Admiral, oh shit, all sections, this is number 1. We need a medical team up on the bridge right now. The Admiral's wounded. I'm alright, though I may need some help with walking. What's the situation out there? They targeted our battleships this time. Legacy's still holding, but the rest are scrapped. We're still up, but we lost 3 of our lower decks. Estimated casualties around 700. And the rest of the fleet? Messed up, but holding. 70% of our destroyers are down, though. Understood. Is our wormhole modulator operational? No, it went down with those lower decks. We're trapped here. I see. How foolish of us. Right, number 1, I need you to broadcast a message to the entire fleet. Tell them to back off and prepare for emergency jump. We're leaving. Leaving? But if we do that, there will be nothing between the Unbidden and Mazaka and Nati Gear. Same with Kodria. I do not have time to argue with you, number 1. Damn it, attention all Commonwealth forces, this is Ibrahim. Break off engagement as soon as possible and proceed to evacuation point Gamma. Maintain defensive posture and prepare for emergency wormhole jump. Carriers, recall your squadrons, and if any one of you still has emergency crews walking outside, recall them this instant. CSV Krishna, you are closest, so we need you to pick us up. The ship is ruined, we're going to evacuate in the escape pods. Admiral, we can't do this, we can't just abandon billions of people here. I am not debating this, certainly not now. You are my first officer, so bloody act like it. Either shoot me and take command or help me up and let's get out of here. Alright, ma'am, let's get you up. Oh hell, we're being target locked again. All forces, this is Ice Queen. Hold fire and put all your power to deflector shields. Stay alive. Krishna, if we're not out in 3 minutes, you are to jump with the rest of the fleet. This is an order. We can make it. The escape pods are just beyond this corner. Here, get inside and let me just strap you in. We don't have time, they're going to fire any second now.